Hello everybody, it's Joanne from Middletown Parks and Rec. Today we're going to be doing some baking, and you can be sure I'm going to be measuring today because with baking you have to measure. It's a scientific process and you need the exact amounts for things to work well with each other. When I was searching for recipes to do, I had to use whatever I had in the house. I wasn't going to the store in the times that we're going through. And I searched around and I found one of my very favorite recipes that I make during the holidays. But why wait till the holidays to make a cookie, because we could use cookies right now. The recipe is called pecan butterballs, or pecan butterballs is what we call it. And I have made this probably every Christmas during my life. The recipe card I have here has a little date in the corner. This is written in my mother's handwriting, and the date in the corner says 1953. So this has been going on since before I was born. And it's a very popular recipe. I know a lot of people do make this. It has quite a few names. It's also called Southern Pecan Butterballs or Mexican Wedding Cakes, but we call it the Pecan Butterballs. And the reason I came across this is that when I looked in my refrigerator, I found out I had some leftover pecans from the holidays that were sitting in the back of the refrigerator with nothing to do. So I decided to do one of my very, very favorite recipes. It doesn't have many ingredients. You don't even need eggs for it. You don't need baking powder or baking soda for it because it's not a cookie that rises. And I was thrilled to know that I had everything in the house for it. I did run a little short on flour. And that's when I decided to go online and figure out what I can substitute, because it needed 2 cups of flour and I was just a little short of flour. So when I looked up what you can substitute for flour, first thing that entered my mind was, pancake flour? Can I use that? But I know it has stuff in there. So when I researched, it said that pancake flour can be used if you're doing a cookie that has a leavening agent in it, something that makes things rise. Now this cookie does not, so I couldn't use it. So I looked in my pantry and figured out what I could use that I had in there. And what I had in there was whole wheat flour. But I've used it for like one recipe and I've never used it again. First thing I did was check the expiration date. We were still in the proper date. And I also put that little bit of flour that I was missing is now whole wheat flour, which actually adds a lot more nutrients to it. But I didn't use a lot of it at all, so it should not make a difference. When you're using whole wheat flour for flour, it is a 3/4 cups of whole wheat flour to 1 cup of flour. So if you're doing all flour substitution, it's 3/4 of a cup of whole wheat flour to regular all-purpose flour. So let's get started. All you need is 2 cups of flour. Now, as I said, this has 1 cup in here, and here I just wanted to show you that I topped it off with the whole wheat flour. It's slightly a different color, but the most of this is regular flour. So we've got our 2 cups of flour in there. So what I'm going to do, because I'm substituting, I'm just going to mix it around to make sure I've distributed it throughout the regular flour. So I'm going to add that to my mixing bowl, our 2 cups of flour. And then it has a 1/4 cup of granulated sugar, regular old sugar, which we have here, 1/4 cup. A 1/2 teaspoon of salt, which I left over here. Sorry about that. 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And we have 2 cups of chopped nuts. Now, the pecans I bought were whole, and I put it in a little chopper. You can actually just take a knife and chop them yourself. I happen to have this. Some of you may recognize this from Pampered Chef. It's a great item to have. I'm not a Pampered Chef person, so I'm not doing any plugs for them, but this is wonderful because I found if I put them in my processor, it just made it too, I didn't want them that processed and that small. I wanted a nice combination of little pieces and big pieces, and this gave me a nice control of it. So I recommend this if you ever go to a Pampered Chef show. So we have 2 cups of the chopped pecans. If you didn't have pecans, you could use walnuts. My mother usually made it with walnuts because she couldn't afford the pecans when we were growing up. And then when I realized that it's really for this kind of pecan, it tastes a lot better. Although you wouldn't notice unless you compared the two. So just add that in with your dry ingredients. And then we're going to just stir it all around to distribute it evenly. My mom used to make it, and she didn't add the nuts till the very end. And she found out that this was a much better place to add the nuts in. So we've got all our mixed flour, sugar, salt, and now you're going to work in the butter. Because these are called butter balls, you know there's a lot of butter in there. So it takes 2 sticks of butter. So what I'm going to do is just add those in. And the butter should be at room temperature so it's workable and nice and soft. All our butter. Oh, one other thing. If you're using a recipe that calls for a greased cookie sheet, but this one is ungreased. But this is, if you're adding butter, this is a great thing to just rub on your cookie sheets to butter your sheet. It's just a greasy piece of paper from the butter. But this one we don't need it because it calls for an unbuttered cookie sheet. Okay. Now we're going to work this in. Just stirring it around so it's going to form a nice little batter. Another thing you want to add when you add the butter in is your vanilla. It takes 2 teaspoons of vanilla. So we're just going to work this around. And rather than have you watch me work it around the whole way, we'll come back when this is a nice batter. Okay, we're back. It all came together. I was using the wrong word. It's not a batter. Batter is when you pour something. This turns into a cookie dough. So working it with my spatula, I use this because I like it nice and firm. It turns into, let me get a little closer, a nice cookie dough. Now, I've washed my hands because we're going to be, I'm using my hands for this. You may have one of those little cookie scoops where you could scoop it out. I've always used my hands, and it comes out great. You're going to use about I have a half a teaspoon measuring spoon here, and that's about how much you're going to use, because you're going to roll little balls, and they're going to look about that size. Some people like them bigger, some people like them smaller. If this is about the size I like, because it's just one bite. This is a very rich cookie. It's a lot of butter, and they're delicious. They're very habit-forming. And you take your ungreased cookie sheet, and you can space these very close because they don't spread, they don't grow. They're just there, so you can get quite a few on there. The recipe will make you about 4 dozen cookies. And it all depends on how big you roll them. So I'm just scooping, rolling, and putting them on. So we're going to get quite a few on this tray. And rather than have you watch me roll 20-something cookies, I'll just roll a few. Like I said, we make this every single holiday season. We look forward to it. We fight over them. And my husband said to me to add cookies to the shopping list, which we haven't gone to the store since last week. We've been to the store once since this whole mess started, and we try to limit. So we're making a list and only going at them. Okay, we had a little mishap there where my phone shut off in the middle of that. Anyways, well, it gave me time to roll all those balls. There's 24, 6 times 4 is 24. So you got 2 dozen on here. We're going to put them in the oven, which has been preheated to 325, and they will cook for 25 minutes. So we're going to put them in the oven. Set our timer for 25 minutes. And then when we come back, you're going to find out why I have a leftover ingredient here. Very important. See you soon. Okay, we are back. It's 25 minutes later, and these just came out of the oven, but they're not finished yet. Let me tell you one other thing. I decided I didn't want to make another 2 dozen, which is what the other half would make. So I wrapped it tightly in saran wrap, and then I put it inside a Ziploc bag, and I'm going to put this in my freezer. When I want to make cookies again, I'll defrost it and do all the same thing. So what you want to do once they come out of the oven after 25 minutes at 325 on an ungreased cookie sheet is let them cool so that they're cool to the touch but still a little warm. Like, I can hold them, but they're still warm. Now you take your powdered sugar, plain old powdered sugar, and you just drop it in and roll it around. And the heat is going to make it stick. And there is your pecan butterball. I just store them in an airtight container. And then sometimes when they're in there for a while, they get a little dull looking, like the sugar kind of melts into them. Just roll them in the sugar again, and you'll be all set. So you've got your pecan butterballs. They are habit-forming, warning. They're delicious. We make them every holiday, but let's consider this a holiday because we wanted cookies. Ta-da! They are our favorite.